The phone pierced the darkness at 3:17 in the morning. Alexander Grant opened his eyes to the harsh, blue glow of his cell phone screen, illuminating the ceiling of his penthouse bedroom. Only 3 people had this number: his assistant Marcus, his business partner Michael West, and headmistress Eleanor Winters from Oak Ridge Elementary School. It was Eleanor calling. Alexander snatched the phone from the nightstand. His pulse quickened as he answered. "Eleanor, what is it?" "Alex, I apologize for calling at this hour." Her voice carried tension she was clearly trying to mask with professionalism. "It's about Lily." The mere mention of the 4-year-old's name sent a jolt through Alexander's body. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, already reaching for the lamp. "She's having an episode. Worse than before." Eleanor hesitated. She woke up screaming during nap time. The staff can't calm her down. "What's she saying?" Alexander was already pulling on his pants phone wedged between shoulder and ear. The pause on the line felt eternal. "She keeps saying, 'Don't let her take me,' over and over. We don't know who she is. Lily won't tell us. She's asking for you." Alexander closed his eyes briefly. 6 weeks. That's how long he had been Lily's guardian. 6 weeks since his best friend Thomas and his wife Sarah had died in what police called a tragic accident. 6 weeks since Alexander had become responsible for a tiny human being who now depended on him entirely. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. The October air bit at his face as Alexander rushed from his building to the waiting Tesla. Rain slicked the Boston streets, reflecting the amber glow of streetlights. His mind raced faster than the car as he navigated the empty, early morning roads. Thomas and Sarah had been his only real friends, college roommates who became family when Alexander had none. Thomas had been the best man at Alexander's wedding to Catherine, a marriage that had dissolved 4 years later when she decided his work schedule meant he'd never be capable of being a family man. How ironic life could be. "Take care of her if anything happens to us." Thomas had made him promise during a dinner last spring, reaching across the table to grip Alexander's wrist with surprising force. Alexander had laughed it off then. "Nothing's going to happen to you two." Now those words haunted him every day. Rain hammered against the windshield as Alexander pulled into the private school's circular driveway. The imposing brick building loomed against the pre-dawn sky. His headlights caught the gleaming sign, "Oak Ridge Elementary Nurturing Tomorrow's Leaders," since 1892. The school had been Alexander's first major charitable donation after his hotel chain went national 5 years ago. Now Lily attended the preschool program here, a special arrangement Eleanor had made when Alexander suddenly became her guardian. Lily stayed overnight whenever Alexander had business trips, like this week when he was supposed to be in Chicago until tomorrow evening. The front doors were already unlocked. The security guard nodded solemnly as Alexander rushed past him into the warm, bright interior that smelled of floor polish and children's tempera paint. Eleanor waited in the hallway outside the nurse's office, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the hour. "She's inside. Nurse Jenkins is with her." "Has this happened before? The screaming about someone taking her?" Alexander kept his voice low. "Not like this." Eleanor guided him toward the door. "She's been having nightmares since she started here, but this was different, more intense." The nurse's office was bathed in soft light from a single lamp. Nurse Jenkins looked up when they entered, relief washing over her tired face. In the corner, curled into a tight ball on a small cot, was Lily. The sight of her made Alexander's chest constrict. So small, so vulnerable. Her blonde hair was tangled around her tear-stained face. She clutched a worn stuffed bunny to her chest. Stella, the bunny Sarah had made for her when she was born. Lily refused to let it out of her sight. "Lily," Alexander said softly, moving toward her. "It's me." Her head snapped up, blue eyes too large for her small face locked onto him. For a heartbeat, she remained frozen. Then she launched herself across the room, colliding with his legs with such force he nearly lost balance. "You came back," she whispered against his knee, her little body trembling. "You came back." Alexander knelt, bringing himself to her level. "Of course I came back. I'll always come back for you, Lily." She looked up at him, her face so serious it made her look years older than 4. "You promised. Remember? You promised." "I promised," he affirmed, though he wasn't entirely sure which promise she meant. There had been so many in those first chaotic days after the funeral. Promises that things would be okay. Promises that he would take care of her. promises he had no idea how to keep. "She can't take me if you're here," Lily whispered, her voice dropping so low Alexander had to strain to hear. "Who, Lily? Who wants to take you?" But Lily pressed her face against his shoulder, refusing to answer. Alexander looked up at Eleanor and Nurse Jenkins, who both shook their heads slightly. "How about we go home?" he suggested gently. "Would you like that?" Lily nodded against his chest, still clutching Stella with white-knuckled fingers. "I'll get her things," Eleanor said, excusing herself. Alexander lifted Lily into his arms, surprised again by how little she weighed. How could something so small contain so much grief, so much fear? "Bad dreams again?" he asked softly. Lily pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "Not dreams," she said with absolute conviction. "She's real." The certainty in her voice sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Minutes later, they were in the car, Lily securely buckled into the booster seat Alexander had installed the day he brought her home. She was quiet now, staring out the window at the rain-soaked streets Stella clutched against her chest. His phone buzzed with a text. "Victoria. Is everything okay? You left so suddenly. Call me when you can." Victoria Pierce, his fiancée of 3 months, elegant, sophisticated Victoria with her law degree from Yale and her family connections that stretched back to Boston's founding fathers. They'd been staying at her downtown condo while he was supposedly in Chicago. Alexander had cut the trip short, unable to focus on business while Lily was having such a difficult time. The irony wasn't lost on him. For 20 years, he'd put business above everything. Now he was canceling meetings for a 4-year-old he barely knew how to talk to. "Is that Victoria?" Lily asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on his phone. Alexander placed the phone face down on the console. "Yes, she's just checking on us." Lily's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened around Stella. "Is she coming to our house?" "Not tonight," Alexander said, noting the "our house" with a mix of satisfaction and terror. The penthouse had been his space for so long that sharing it still felt strange. "It's just us tonight." Relief visibly washed over Lily's small features. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the high-rise overlooking Boston Harbor. Alexander carried a now sleeping Lily through the private entrance, nodding at the night doorman as they passed. The penthouse was exactly as he'd left it 3 days ago, immaculate modern and utterly unsuitable for a child. Despite his interior designer's efforts to create a proper bedroom for Lily, the place remained what it had always been, a bachelor sanctuary. All glass, steel, and leather, no primary colors, no toys strewn about, no evidence that a child lived here, except for the single pink backpack hanging on a hook by the door. Alexander carried Lily to her room, formerly his home office, now painted a soft yellow at the designer's insistence. "Children need warmth," she'd explained, as if Alexander had any idea what children needed. He gently laid Lily on the bed, carefully extracting Stella from her grip, long enough to remove her shoes and jacket. As he pulled the blanket over her, her eyes fluttered open briefly. "Don't leave," she murmured. "I won't," he promised, pulling the small armchair closer to the bed. "I'll be right here." Satisfied, she drifted back to sleep, one hand still clutching Stella. Alexander watched her sleeping form, the steady rise and fall of her chest. What had she meant about someone wanting to take her? Was it just the fear of abandonment, natural after losing her parents? Or something else? He leaned his head back against the chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Victoria. "Alex, please call. I'm worried." He silenced the phone without responding. Victoria would understand. She always did. That was one of the things he loved about her unflappable nature, her ability to adapt to any situation, including the sudden addition of a grieving 4-year-old to their carefully planned life together. The wedding was still scheduled for spring. Victoria had smoothly adjusted their plans immediately, researching the best schools, the most qualified nannies, the top child psychologists. "We'll make it work," she'd assured him, squeezing his hand as they left the funeral. "Thomas and Sarah would want us to." Alexander closed his eyes just for a moment. He woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Lily standing before him, fully dressed in a mismatched outfit of purple leggings and an orange t-shirt, her blonde hair a wild tangle around her face. "I'm hungry," she announced. Alexander checked his watch, 7:34 a.m. "Right, breakfast?" He straightened, wincing at the stiffness in his neck from sleeping in the chair. "What would you like?" "Pancakes," Lily said definitively. "With faces." Faces, Mommy always made pancakes with blueberry eyes and a strawberry smile. Her voice was matter-of-fact, without the tremor that usually accompanied mentions of her parents. Ah, Alexander stood stretching. I'm not sure I have blueberries or strawberries. Lily's face fell slightly. But, he continued quickly, we could go out for breakfast and get some at the store afterward. For tomorrow. She considered this head tilted to one side in a gesture so reminiscent of Sarah that it made his heart ache. Okay, she said finally, but I need to bring Stella. Of course. While Lily brushed her teeth, Alexander quickly changed his clothes and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Victoria and 1 from Michael. He'd have to call them both back, but not yet. First breakfast. They were halfway through their meal at a nearby cafe when his phone rang again. Victoria. Alexander hesitated, then answered. Alex, thank God. Victoria's voice was warm with relief. I've been so worried. Are you and Lily all right? We're fine, he said, watching Lily methodically dissect her pancakes, setting aside all the blueberries to eat last. Lily had a rough night at school. I picked her up early. Poor thing. Victoria's sympathy sounded genuine. Do you want me to come over? I could bring lunch? Alexander glanced at Lily, who had gone very still, her fork suspended mid-air. She wasn't looking at him, but he could tell she was listening intently. Not today, he said carefully. We're having a quiet day at home. Of course. Victoria's disappointment was palpable, but controlled. Maybe tomorrow, then. I miss you. I miss you, too, Alexander said automatically, though the words felt hollow. I'll call you later. As he ended the call, he noticed Lily had resumed eating her shoulders, visibly relaxed. You don't like Victoria much, do you? He asked gently. Lily shrugged, eyes fixed on her plate. She's pretty. Yes, she is, Alexander agreed, waiting for more. She smiles a lot, Lily continued after a moment, but not with her eyes. The observation, so adult and perceptive, caught Alexander off guard. Before he could respond, Lily changed the subject. Can we go to the park after breakfast? The one with the ducks? Sure, he agreed, filing away her comment about Victoria for later consideration. The day passed in a blur of simple activities. The park where Lily solemnly fed ducks with bread the cafe had given them. The grocery store where she insisted on pushing the small, child-sized cart, carefully selecting fruit for tomorrow's pancakes. A bookstore where Alexander found himself buying far more children's books than seemed reasonable for one small child. Through it all, Lily remained watchful, serious beyond her years, clutching Stella with one hand, even as she went about these normal activities. Only occasionally did her face light up with genuine childhood delight, when a particularly bold duck waddled too close, or when Alexander agreed to buy a book about a rabbit that looked suspiciously like Stella. By late afternoon, they were back at the penthouse. While Lily arranged her new books on the shelf in her room, Alexander finally returned Michael's call. Where the hell are you? Michael demanded, without preamble. The Sanderson meeting started 30 minutes ago. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm still in Boston. Family emergency. A beat of silence. Family? You mean the kid? Lily, Alexander corrected. Yes, she needed me. Michael sighed heavily. Alex, I know you're trying to do right by Thomas and Sarah, but we're in the middle of the biggest deal of the year. The Sanderson group isn't going to wait forever. They'll wait, Alexander said firmly. If they want our hotel chain in their portfolio, they'll wait a few more days. This isn't like you, Michael said, his tone softening slightly. You've never put anything ahead of business. Things change, Alexander replied, watching as Lily emerged from her room, Stella tucked under one arm, a book clutched in her free hand. Look, reschedule the meeting for next week. I'll be there. He ended the call before Michael could protest further. Will you read to me? Lily asked, holding up the book. Alexander nodded, settling onto the couch. Lily climbed up beside him, her small body fitting perfectly into the crook of his arm. As he began to read, he felt her gradually relax against him, some of the vigilance leaving her posture. This was new territory for him, comfort, security, routine. The very things he'd always claimed he was too busy to provide when Catherine had talked about having children. Yet here he was reading Goodnight Moon for the 3rd time that week, finding a strange peace in the simple repetition. The doorbell rang just as he turned the last page. Lily tensed, instantly clutching Stella tighter. It's probably just a package, Alexander assured her, though he wasn't expecting any deliveries. When he opened the door, Victoria stood there elegant as always, in a cream cashmere sweater and tailored slacks, her dark red hair swept into a perfect chignon. She held a large shopping bag in one hand. "Surprise," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know you said not today, but I thought you both could use some cheering up." She held up the bag. "Dinner from Salvatore's, your favorite." Alexander hesitated, caught between politeness and the promise of a quiet evening with Lily. Before he could decide, Victoria stepped smoothly past him into the apartment. "Hello, Lily," she called, her voice taking on the slightly higher pitch adults often use with children. "I brought dinner, and look." She reached into her purse and produced a small wrapped package. "A little something for you, too." Lily had retreated to the far end of the couch, Stella held protectively before her, like a shield. She didn't respond to Victoria's greeting, her eyes tracking the woman's every movement. "She's a little tired," Alexander explained, closing the door. "We had a long day." "Of course," Victoria said, moving toward the kitchen with practiced familiarity. "All the more reason for a nice dinner. You two relax while I set everything up." Alexander looked at Lily, who remained frozen on the couch. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. "Victoria brought your favorite pasta." Lily's expression suggested pasta was hardly adequate compensation for Victoria's presence, but she gave a tiny nod. Dinner was an exercise in awkward silence. Victoria maintained a steady stream of cheerful conversation, describing a case she was working on, asking Lily gentle questions that received minimal responses, updating Alexander on the wedding planner's latest ideas. Through it all, Lily picked at her food, her eyes rarely leaving Victoria. "Aren't you going to open your present?" Victoria asked as they finished eating, pushing the small package toward Lily. With obvious reluctance, Lily unwrapped it, revealing a silver charm bracelet with a single charm. A tiny rabbit. "It's like your bunny," Victoria said brightly. "Do you like it?" Lily stared at the bracelet, then at Victoria. "Stella isn't a rabbit. She's a bunny." Victoria's smile flickered, but held. "Of course, a bunny. My mistake." "Thank you for the bracelet," Lily said with mechanical politeness, setting it aside without putting it on. "May I be excused?" she asked Alexander, ignoring Victoria completely. "Sure," he said, recognizing the signs of Lily reaching her social limit. "Don't forget to brush your teeth." As soon as Lily disappeared down the hallway, Victoria's smile dropped. "She hates me." Alexander sighed, gathering the plates. "She doesn't hate you. She's just adjusting." "It's been 6 weeks, Alex." And Victoria stood, helping him clear the table. "I'm trying, but she looks at me like I'm going to steal her bunny and run." "She looks at everyone that way," Alexander said, though he knew it wasn't entirely true. Lily was reserved but polite with Eleanor, animated with Nurse Jenkins, and had even smiled at the doorman this morning. It was only Victoria who received this wall of silent suspicion. "She's been through a lot," he added. "Give her time." Victoria softened, moving around the table to slip her arms around his waist. "I know, I'm being impatient. It's just, this isn't what we planned." Alexander tensed slightly at the words, though he knew she meant nothing by them. "Plans change," he said, echoing his earlier words to Michael. "Of course they do," Victoria agreed quickly, reaching up to touch his face. "And we'll adapt. The three of us will make a beautiful family." The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with expectations and complications. "I should check on her," Alexander said gently, disengaging from Victoria's embrace. He found Lily in her bathroom, meticulously brushing her teeth. She had changed into pajamas, inside out and backwards, but he wouldn't correct her tonight. She was trying so hard to be independent. "All set for bed?" he asked when she finished. She nodded eyes, serious. "Is Victoria sleeping here tonight?" "No," Alexander assured her. "She's just visiting." Lily studied his face, as if checking for signs of deception. Finally satisfied, she padded to her bedroom, crawling under the yellow comforter. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, tucking the blanket around her small form. "Would you like another story?" he asked. Lily shook her head, clutching Stella close. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course." As he sat in the now familiar armchair beside her bed, Lily's eyes began to drift closed. Just when he thought she was asleep, they snapped open again. "Alexander," she said, her voice thick with approaching sleep, "you won't let her take me, right?" "No one is going to take you away from me," he promised firmly. "No one." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied, and finally surrendered to sleep. Alexander remained in the chair, watching her, troubled by the recurrence of this fear. Who did she think wanted to take her, a character, from a nightmare, or something more concrete? When he finally returned to the living room, Victoria was tidying up, loading the dishwasher with efficient movements. "Is she asleep?" she asked. "Yes," Alexander said, sinking onto the couch. Finally. Victoria dried her hands and came to sit beside him, her perfume, something expensive and floral, surrounding him. "You look exhausted," she observed, running her fingers through his hair. "This can't be sustainable, Alex. You need help with her." "I have help," he said defensively. "Eleanor at the school. The housekeeper comes 3 times a week." "I meant more consistent help. A nanny, perhaps." Victoria's voice was reasonable, logical. "Someone who could stay overnight when you travel. Someone professional, trained to handle childhood trauma." Alexander shook his head. "I don't want to outsource her care to strangers." "What about family?" Victoria suggested. "Doesn't she have grandparents, aunts or uncles?" "No grandparents. Thomas's parents died years ago. Sarah's mother is in a care facility with advanced Alzheimer's." Alexander rubbed his eyes. "There's a cousin somewhere in Arizona, but they weren't close." "So it's just you," Victoria said softly. "Alex, this is a lot to take on alone." "I'm not alone," he said, taking her hand. "I have you." Victoria smiled, but something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or calculation. "Yes," she agreed after the briefest pause. "You do." Later, after Victoria had gone, Alexander found himself drawn back to Lily's room. She slept peacefully now, one arm flung above her head, the other still securely around Stella. On her nightstand sat the untouched silver bracelet from Victoria, the tiny rabbit charm, catching the light from the hall. Beside it was a framed photograph of Thomas and Sarah, their faces frozen in eternal happiness, at a beach somewhere, Lily a toddler, between them held aloft by their joined hands. Alexander picked up the photo, studying his friends' faces. What would they think of how he was handling this? Would they approve of his fumbling attempts at parenthood? Would they understand the impossible position he found himself in, torn between the business he'd built and the child they'd entrusted to him? What would they think of Victoria? Alexander replaced the photo carefully, then noticed something on the floor beside Lily's bed. A drawing done in crayon on construction paper. He picked it up, angling it toward the light from the hallway. The drawing showed 3 figures. A tall one labeled "Me" in Lily's uneven printing, a small one labeled "Lily," and between them a third figure with spiky red hair and unnaturally long arms reaching toward the Lily figure. This figure had no name, but its face was drawn with a harsh black crayon, the eyes 2 empty circles. Alexander stared at the drawing, a chill spreading through his chest. He glanced at Lily, still sleeping peacefully, then back at the drawing. The red hair. Victoria had red hair. Was this what Lily had been trying to tell him? Was Victoria the she that Lily feared would take her away? The idea seemed absurd. Victoria had been nothing but supportive since Thomas and Sarah's deaths. She'd rearranged her life to accommodate Lily, changed wedding plans, researched schools and therapists. Why would Lily fear her? Yet children had instincts adults often ignored. And Lily had been clear in her discomfort around Victoria from the beginning. Alexander folded the drawing and slipped it into his pocket, unsure what to do with this information, but certain he couldn't ignore it. As he turned to leave, Lily stirred slightly. "Stay," she murmured, still mostly asleep. Alexander hesitated, then lowered himself into the armchair again. "I'll stay," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." As he settled in for another night of uncomfortable sleep, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text. Victoria again. "Thinking of you both. Let's talk tomorrow about finding Lily some help. I know a wonderful child psychologist." Alexander stared at the message for a long moment before silencing the phone without responding. Something felt off, though he couldn't pinpoint what. Victoria was being helpful, concerned. The perfect partner as he navigated this unexpected territory of guardianship. So, why did her text make him uneasy? Across the room, Lily slept on one small hand, reaching out from under the covers, as if searching for something, or someone, in her sleep. Alexander gently tucked her hand back under the blanket, his decision crystallizing as he did. Whatever Lily feared, whoever she thought might take her away, he wouldn't let it happen. He had made a promise, to Thomas, to Sarah, and now to Lily herself. He would keep her safe, even if he wasn't sure what he was protecting her from. Outside the window, rain began to fall again, silver threads in the darkness. Alexander settled deeper into the chair, watching over Lily as the night deepened around them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The drawing in his pocket seemed to weigh more than paper, should a reminder that not all threats were obvious, and not all promises were easy to keep. Morning arrived with weak October sunlight filtering through the clouds. Alexander woke with a jolt, momentarily disoriented to find himself in Lily's room again. The clock on the wall showed 6:43 a.m. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed, whispering secrets to Stella. She looked up when he stirred, her face serious as always. "You stayed all night," she observed. "I promised I would," Alexander replied, working the kinks out of his neck. A tiny smile touched Lily's lips, the first genuine smile he'd seen since the night at Oak Ridge. "We should make pancakes," she announced, with faces. "Yes, we should," Alexander agreed, rising stiffly from the chair. "And you know what I think will stay home today? No school, just us." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Really? We can make pancakes, read books, maybe watch a movie?" The smile grew, transforming her solemn face into something that actually resembled a 4-year-old's. "Can we build a fort with blankets?" Alexander blinked, having no idea where that request had come from. "I suppose so. I've never built a fort before. Daddy taught me," Lily said, sliding off the bed, Stella clutched in one hand. "You need chairs and blankets and books to hold down the corners." "Books, of course," Alexander nodded seriously. "Lead the way, fort expert." As they headed to the kitchen to start breakfast, Alexander felt his phone buzz in his pocket. Without checking it, he knew it would be Victoria or Michael, or both, demanding his attention, his presence, his focus on the life he'd built before Lily. The life that now seemed increasingly distant and hollow. Let them wait, he decided, watching Lily carefully arrange blueberries into eyes on her pancake. Some promises mattered more than others, and he was only just beginning to understand which ones those were. The next morning began with pancakes and laughter, a temporary reprieve from the tension that had been building since Thomas and Sarah's deaths. Alexander watched in amazement as Lily meticulously arranged blueberries and strawberry slices into smiling faces on their breakfast. For a brief moment, she looked like any ordinary 4-year-old focused intently on her creation, the weight of her grief momentarily lifted. "Perfect," Alexander declared when she presented his plate with flourish. "You're not supposed to eat the face parts first," Lily instructed seriously. "That's the rule." "Ah, of course. Very important rule." Alexander nodded, committing this sacred pancake protocol to memory. His phone buzzed for the 5th time that morning. He'd silenced it during breakfast, but the persistent vibration against the countertop was impossible to ignore. Victoria again, then Michael, then Victoria once more. Lily glanced at the phone, her momentary lightness fading. "Are you going to answer it?" "Not right now," Alexander assured her. "Right now is pancake time." The smile returned, small but genuine. "And fort building time after." "Absolutely." As promised, after breakfast, they transformed the living room into an elaborate blanket fort. Alexander, who had negotiated billion-dollar hotel acquisitions across 3 continents, found himself completely outmatched by the structural engineering challenges of proper fort construction. Lily, however, proved to be a patient teacher. "No, the heavy books go on the corners to hold the blankets down," she explained, hefting a coffee table art book with both hands. "Daddy always used his law books, but these are good too." The mention of Thomas, a corporate attorney who had been Alexander's legal counsel before becoming his friend, sent a familiar pang through Alexander's chest. "Your daddy built good forts," Lily nodded solemnly. "The best. He said fort building was a very important skill they didn't teach in law school." Alexander chuckled, recognizing Thomas's dry humor. He was right about that. When the fort was finally complete, they crawled inside with a stack of books and Stella. The enclosed space, illuminated by the soft glow of a reading lamp they dragged inside, created a cocoon of safety. Alexander found himself relaxing for the first time in days as he read story after story to Lily, who curled against his side, occasionally correcting him when he tried to skip pages. It was nearly noon when his phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Eleanor. "Just checking in, is Lily feeling better today?" He quickly responded that they were taking a mental health day at home. Everything was fine. "Who's that?" Lily asked, peering at the screen. "Ms. Eleanor from school. She's making sure you're okay." Lily considered this. "I like Ms. Eleanor. She has kind eyes." Alexander was struck again by Lily's perceptiveness. "She does, doesn't she? Very kind eyes." "Not like Victoria's eyes," Lily added quietly, almost to herself. Alexander set down the phone. "What about Victoria's eyes?" Lily fidgeted with Stella's ear, avoiding his gaze. They're pretty, but cold. Cold how, like she's pretending. Lily looked up at him finally. Mommy said some people wear masks. They show one face, but hide another one underneath. Alexander felt a chill despite the warmth of the fort. When did your mom say that? When we were moving, she told me we had to be careful about who we trusted. Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but her small fingers worked anxiously at Stella's worn fur. Moving from where? Our old house. We had to leave at night. Mommy said it was an adventure, but she was scared. I could tell. This was the first Alexander had heard of any mysterious move. As far as he knew, Thomas and Sarah had lived in the same Cambridge townhouse for years before their car accident 6 weeks ago. When was this, Lily? She shrugged. Before, when it was hot outside. Summer then, perhaps July or August, just before they died. Did your dad say why you were moving? Lily shook her head. He was on the phone a lot. He argued with someone. Mommy packed our things in black bags, not boxes. She said it was a secret. Alexander tried to reconcile this with what he knew of Thomas and Sarah. They had seemed perfectly normal the last time he saw them at a dinner 3 weeks before their deaths. Thomas had been quieter than usual, perhaps, but Alexander had attributed that to work stress. Nothing had indicated they were in any kind of trouble or danger. Did they say who they were afraid of? Lily clutched Stella tighter. The woman with red hair. Alexander felt his heart rate accelerate. Victoria has red hair. Not Victoria, Lily said, her eyes widening slightly. The other one. The one who came to our house and made Mommy cry. What other one, Lily? Did you know her name? She shook her head. Mommy called her that woman. Daddy called her Vanessa. Vanessa. The name meant nothing to Alexander. In all his years of friendship with Thomas and Sarah, he'd never heard them mention anyone by that name. Did you ever meet this Vanessa? Once. She came to the house when Mommy was alone with me. She had red hair like fire and a voice like ice. Lily's description was childlike, but vivid. She said she was Mommy's friend, but Mommy was scared. She sent me to my room, but I listened at the stairs. What did you hear? The red-haired lady said, he belongs with me, not you. You stole him. Then Mommy started crying, and the lady said, I'll take everything you love. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. After she left, Mommy called Daddy, and that's when we started packing. Alexander's mind raced. Could Thomas have been having an affair? It seemed impossible. He had adored Sarah. But what other explanation could there be for a mysterious, red-haired woman threatening to take everything Sarah loved? And what did any of this have to do with Victoria? Lily, why are you afraid of Victoria? He asked gently. Lily was quiet for so long that Alexander thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. She smells the same. The same as who? The red-haired lady, Vanessa. They use the same perfume. Alexander sat back trying to process this information. It could be coincidence. Many women wore the same perfumes, and Lily was only 4. Her memory might be confusing details, yet the fear in her eyes seemed too genuine to dismiss entirely. His phone rang again, shattering the quiet intimacy of the fort. This time it was Michael, and from the repeated calls, Alexander knew he couldn't put him off any longer. I need to take this, he told Lily. It's Michael from work. I'll be right back. And he crawled out of the fort and answered the call in the kitchen, keeping Lily in his sight. Alex, this has gone far enough, Michael began without preamble. The Sanderson group is threatening to walk. They want to meet with the CEO, not some underling. I told you to reschedule, Alexander replied, keeping his voice low. For next week, yes, but they're in town now. They've flown in executives from 3 countries specifically to meet with you. Michael's voice was tight with stress. Look, I understand the situation with the kid. Lily. With Lily, Michael corrected himself impatiently. But this deal is worth over $500 million. If it falls through, our shareholders will revolt. Alexander rubbed his forehead, feeling the tension headache building. What time is the meeting? 2 o'clock, at the downtown office. Alexander checked his watch. It was just past noon. I can't bring Lily to the office. Get a babysitter, Michael suggested. Or call Victoria. She's been calling me all morning looking for you. Why would Victoria call you? Because you're not answering her calls, Michael said, exasperation clear in his voice. She's worried about you, Alex. We all are. You're not acting like yourself. Maybe I'm finally acting like myself, Alexander muttered. Fine, I'll be there at 2, but I'm bringing Lily. Alex, 2 o'clock, Michael. He ended the call and turned to find Lily standing just outside the fort, watching him with those two perceptive eyes. "Do we have to go somewhere?" she asked. "I have an important meeting," Alexander explained. "Just for a little while. You'll come with me?" Lily's face fell slightly. "To your work?" "Yes, but it won't be too bad. We have a playroom there." This was stretching the truth. They had a small daycare facility for employees' children, but it was hardly a playroom. Still, it would have to do. "Can Stella come?" Of course Stella can come. Alexander helped Lily change into a more office-appropriate outfit. A simple blue dress and matching cardigan he'd purchased in a panic when she first came to live with him. As they were getting ready to leave, his phone rang yet again. Victoria. This time he answered. "Victoria, I'm sorry I haven't called back. It's been a hectic morning." "Alex, thank God." Victoria's voice was a mixture of relief and reproach. "I've been worried sick. Is Lily all right? Are you—" "We're fine. Just having a quiet morning at home. Michael told me about the Sanderson meeting. Do you need me to watch Lily?" Alexander hesitated, glancing at Lily, who was pretending not to listen as she carefully put her shoes on the wrong feet. The conversation from the fort echoed in his mind. "No, but thank you. I'm bringing her with me." "To the office, Alex. That's hardly appropriate for such an important meeting. She'll be in the daycare facility," he explained. "It's only for a couple of hours." Victoria sighed. "This is exactly what I meant about needing proper childcare arrangements. You can't just improvise parenthood, especially with your responsibilities." Her tone, reasonable, logical, and slightly condescending, grated on him. "I'm figuring it out as I go." Clearly. The single word contained volumes of judgment. "Well, perhaps I'll stop by the office later. I'd like to see you both." "That's not necessary," Alexander said quickly. "I'll call you after the meeting." "Of course." Victoria's voice cooled noticeably. "I'll let you go then." After she hung up, Alexander stood staring at the phone, troubled by the conversation. Victoria was being helpful, concerned, all the things a supportive partner should be. So why did her every suggestion feel like an attempt to separate him from Lily? He was being paranoid, he decided. The stress of sudden parenthood combined with Lily's fears was making him see threats where none existed. "Ready?" he asked Lily, who had finally managed to get her shoes on the correct feet. She nodded, clutching Stella to her chest, face solemn, once more. The Grant Luxury Hotel Group headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Boston. As Alexander guided Lily through the opulent lobby, he was acutely aware of the stares they attracted. The notorious workaholic CEO with a small child in tow was not a sight the employees were accustomed to seeing. He introduced Lily to the daycare supervisor, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Chen, who immediately began showing Lily the toys and books available. Lily clung to Alexander's hand, reluctant to let go. "I'll be back very soon," he promised. "Mrs. Chen will take good care of you, and you have Stella." Lily finally nodded, though her eyes remained uncertain. "You promise you'll come back?" "I promise," Alexander said firmly. "Nothing could keep me away." The meeting with the Sanderson group dragged interminably. Alexander found himself checking his watch. Every few minutes, his attention divided between the PowerPoint presentations and thoughts of Lily alone in an unfamiliar place. "Mr. Grant, perhaps you could elaborate on your expansion strategy for the Asian market," Mr. Sanderson prompted, clearly having noticed his distraction. Alexander forced himself to focus. "Of course. As I was saying, we've identified key locations in Singapore, Tokyo, and Seoul." He was midway through his explanation when his assistant slipped into the room and handed him a note. "Urgent call from daycare," it read. Alexander's heart nearly stopped. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said, rising abruptly. "I have an emergency to attend to. Mr. West will continue the presentation." Michael's face registered shock, then anger, but Alexander was already out the door. He took the stairs rather than waiting for the elevator racing down 3 flights to the daycare level. When he burst through the door, he found Mrs. Chen trying to comfort a hysterical Lily who was huddled in a corner, screaming. "What happened?" Alexander demanded, dropping to his knees beside Lily. "I don't know," Mrs. Chen said, her face creased with concern. "She was fine playing with the dollhouse. Then a woman came to the observation window. Many parents like to check on their children during the day. And Lily just started screaming. I couldn't calm her down." "What woman?" Alexander asked sharply, gathering Lily into his arms. She clung to him, her small body shaking with sobs. "I didn't recognize her," Mrs. Chen admitted. Red hair, very elegant. She said she was with you? Victoria, Alexander muttered. She wanted to come in and help with Lily, but I explained only authorized individuals are allowed in the daycare area. She seemed displeased. Where is she now? She left after I called you, said she'd meet you upstairs. Alexander looked down at Lily, who had stopped screaming, but was still trembling against his chest. Lily was at Victoria at the window. Lily shook her head violently. Then who? The red-haired lady, Lily whispered, her voice ragged from crying. Vanessa, she found me. Alexander felt ice slide down his spine. Are you sure it wasn't Victoria? It was her, Lily insisted. She smiled at me through the window. Not a nice smile. She said, I found you. Mrs. Chen frowned. I didn't hear her say anything. The observation area is soundproofed. She didn't say it with her mouth, Lily explained, as if this should be obvious. She said it with her eyes. Alexander looked to Mrs. Chen. Can you describe this woman more specifically? Mrs. Chen thought for a moment. Tall, slim, very expensive-looking clothes, red hair pulled back, green eyes, I think. The description could have fit Victoria exactly, but it could also fit countless other women in Boston's financial district. Where's Stella? Lily suddenly asked, looking around frantically. Mrs. Chen pointed to a chair where the stuffed bunny sat. Right there, dear. You set her down when you started playing with the dollhouse. Lily scrambled out of Alexander's arms and ran to Stella, checking her over, as if looking for injuries. She's okay, she said, with palpable relief. Alexander made a quick decision. We're leaving. Mrs. Chen, thank you for your help. Of course, Mr. Grant. I'm sorry about what happened. Alexander gathered Lily's small backpack and took her hand. It's not your fault. As they waited for the elevator, Alexander texted his assistant to inform Michael he would not be returning to the meeting. Then he turned off his phone completely. Are we going home? Lily asked, still clutching Stella protectively. Not yet, Alexander said, an idea forming. We're going to see some friends of mine first. The office of Jenkins and Associates Private Investigations was located in a converted warehouse in South Boston. Alexander had used their services occasionally for business due diligence, but never for anything personal. Until now. Richard Jenkins, the firm's founder, looked surprised when his receptionist showed Alexander and Lily into his office. Mr. Grant, he said, rising from behind his desk, this is unexpected. I need your help, Alexander said without preamble. Discreetly, Jenkins gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. That's what we do best. He nodded to Lily. And who's this? This is Lily. She's my ward. Alexander helped Lily into one of the chairs, where she sat silently watching Jenkins with wary eyes. I see. Jenkins sat back down. How can we help you today? Alexander took a deep breath. I need you to investigate someone. Thoroughly. Background history associates. Everything you can find. May I ask, who? Victoria Pierce. Jenkins's eyebrows rose slightly. Your fiancé? Yes. If Jenkins was surprised by the request to investigate Alexander's own fiancée, he hit it well. And what specifically are you looking for? Anything unusual? Discrepancies in her background? Previous names she might have used? And I need to know if she has any connection to a woman named Vanessa, who might have known my friends Thomas and Sarah Coleman. Jenkins made notes as Alexander spoke. The Colemans, they died recently in a car accident, correct? I read about it in the papers. Yes, Lily is their daughter. Alexander lowered his voice. I have reason to believe their deaths might not have been an accident. Jenkins set down his pen. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Grant. I know, that's why I'm here. I need facts, not speculation. And you think Ms. Pierce might be involved somehow? Alexander glanced at Lily, who was silently examining the snow globe on Jenkins' desk. I don't know. That's what I need to find out. Jenkins leaned forward. Mr. Grant, forgive my bluntness, but are you aware how this looks? A wealthy man suddenly becomes guardian to a child, then seeks to investigate his fiancée just months before their wedding. I'm aware it looks like cold feet, or worse, Alexander acknowledged, but this isn't about the wedding. It's about Lily's safety. Jenkins studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, we'll be discreet. When do you need this information? As soon as possible. Today, if you can manage it. That's not much time for a thorough investigation. Start with the basics, Alexander suggested. Employment history, education, previous names, or marriages, and any connection to the name Vanessa. I'll put my best people on it immediately, Jenkins promised. Where can I reach you? Your office. No. Alexander wrote down his personal cell number. Call me directly, and please absolute discretion. No one can know about this investigation. Understood. As they left the investigator's office, Alexander checked his watch. It was nearly 5. Soon the business day would end, and he'd have to decide where to take Lily for the night. Going home seemed risky. Victoria had a key to his penthouse. A hotel would be the obvious choice, but that posed its own problems. As CEO of a luxury hotel chain, he was too recognizable. Word would get back to Victoria or Michael almost immediately. "I'm hungry," Lily announced as they got back into the car. "Me too," Alexander realized. Neither of them had eaten since the pancakes that morning. "Let's get some dinner." He drove to a small family restaurant in Cambridge, far from his usual haunts. The place was quiet, with checkered tablecloths and paper placemats for children to color on. Lily seemed to relax as she worked on her drawing, carefully selecting crayons from the cup the waitress had provided. "What are you drawing?" Alexander asked after they'd ordered. Lily held up the paper. "Our fort. See, that's you, and that's me, and that's Stella." The figures were childish stick drawings, but recognizable. Alexander smiled. "It's perfect. Can we build another fort tonight?" Lily asked hopefully. Alexander hesitated. "We might not be going home tonight, Lily. We might stay somewhere else." Her expression grew serious. "Because of the red-haired lady." "Yes, just to be safe." Lily nodded solemnly. "That's what Mommy and Daddy were doing too, staying somewhere else to be safe." "Do you know where they were staying?" Alexander asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Lily shrugged. "A house with blue shutters? By the water? Mommy said it was our secret house." Alexander's mind raced. Thomas and Sarah had never mentioned a second home. But if they were hiding from someone, they wouldn't have advertised its location. "Was it far from your regular house?" "We drove a long time," Lily recalled. "Through the night. I slept in the car." Not much help there. It could have been anywhere within several hours' drive of Boston. Their food arrived, temporarily distracting Lily from the conversation, as she methodically separated the different items on her plate so they wouldn't touch. Alexander considered their options. They needed somewhere safe to stay, somewhere Victoria wouldn't think to look. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He'd turned it back on after leaving Jenkins' office. A text from an unknown number. "Initial results ready. Call when convenient." Jenkins had found something already. Alexander felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. "Lily, I need to make a quick call. Keep eating okay." She nodded, focused on carefully cutting her chicken into precisely even pieces. Alexander stepped just outside the restaurant's entrance, where he could still see Lily through the window, and called Jenkins. "Mr. Grant," Jenkins answered promptly. "We've completed our preliminary research on Ms. Pierce." "What did you find?" "Several interesting discrepancies. First, her claimed educational background doesn't fully check out. She says she graduated from Yale Law in 2010, but there's no record of a Victoria Pierce graduating that year. However, there is a record of a Vanessa Richards graduating then." Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. Vanessa Richards. Yes, the physical description matches. Red hair, green eyes, similar height and build. Vanessa Richards changed her name to Victoria Pierce legally in 2012. No reason given for the change. What else? Ms. Pierce, or Ms. Richards, has been married twice before. Both marriages were to wealthy older men. Both ended when the husbands died unexpectedly. Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him. Died how? The first, Harold Grayson, died in 2014 of apparent heart failure at age 62. The second, Robert Pierce, from whom she kept the name, died in 2018 in a boating accident. Both deaths were ruled accidental or natural causes. And she inherited substantially in both cases, though there were some legal challenges from family members that were eventually settled out of court. Alexander leaned against the wall, his mind reeling. Any connection to Thomas or Sarah Coleman? Nothing direct yet. We're still digging into that. But here's something interesting. Vanessa Richards has a half-sister named Sarah. Different last name. Sarah Lawson, before she married. Sarah Coleman's maiden name had been Lawson. Are you saying Victoria, Vanessa, is Sarah Coleman's half-sister? It appears so. Same father, different mothers. Their father, James Lawson, was quite wealthy. He died in 2008, leaving the bulk of his estate to Sarah, his daughter from his first marriage. Vanessa, the daughter from his second marriage, contested the will, but lost. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Victoria, or rather Vanessa, had been pursuing Alexander not for himself, but for his connection to Thomas and Sarah, and possibly for his money, just as she had with her previous husbands. But what about Thomas and Sarah's deaths? Could she have been involved? Mr. Jenkins, I need you to look into the accident that killed Thomas and Sarah Coleman. Every detail. Already on it, Jenkins assured him. I'll call as soon as we have more information. Alexander ended the call and stood frozen for a moment, processing the implications. Victoria had lied about everything. Her name, her past, her previous marriages. She was Sarah's half-sister with a grudge about their father's inheritance. And she had somehow insinuated herself into Alexander's life just months before Thomas and Sarah died. It couldn't be coincidence. Through the window, he could see Lily still eating her dinner, oblivious to the disturbing revelations. Her instincts about Victoria had been right all along. The woman with the cold eyes who smelled like the mysterious Vanessa, they were one and the same. Alexander's phone rang again. Victoria. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. Hello, Victoria. Alex, where are you? Her voice was tight with controlled anger. Michael said you left the Sanderson meeting in the middle of the presentation and never came back. There was an emergency with Lily. So I heard. The daycare supervisor said she became hysterical when I looked through the window. Alexander's grip tightened on the phone. Except you claim you never went to the daycare. A pause. What are you talking about? Of course I went to the daycare. I wanted to check on Lily. Mrs. Chen said the woman claimed to be with me, but didn't identify herself as Victoria Pierce. Well, she's mistaken. Victoria's voice was cool and reasonable. I clearly introduced myself. Perhaps in all the commotion with Lily, she misheard. It was plausible enough, but Alexander no longer believed anything Victoria said. Where are you now? She asked. I stopped by the penthouse, but you're not home. We're having dinner. Lily was hungry. Where I'll join you. That's not necessary, Alexander said carefully. We'll be home soon. You're avoiding me. Victoria's voice hardened. Ever since Lily's episode yesterday, you've been acting strangely. What did she say to you, Alex? The question was too pointed, too suspicious. Nothing. She's just been having a hard time adjusting. She's been filling your head with stories, Victoria pressed. Children have vivid imaginations, Alex, especially traumatized ones. I'm aware of that. Then come home. We need to talk about this situation properly, about getting Lily the professional help she needs. Alexander glanced through the window at Lily, who had finished eating and was back to coloring. I'll call you later, Victoria. We're still eating. Alex, he hung up, his decision made. They wouldn't be going back to the penthouse tonight, or possibly ever again if his suspicions proved correct. When he returned to the table, Lily looked up from her drawing. Was that Victoria? Alexander nodded, seeing no point in lying. Yes, it was. Is she mad? A little, but don't worry about it. Lily studied his face with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. You know now, don't you, about the red-haired lady? I know some things, Alexander admitted. I'm trying to learn more. Mommy said knowledge is power, Lily said seriously, but secrets can be dangerous. Your mom was very smart, Alexander agreed. Lily, do you remember any more about the blue house? The secret one, by the water? Anything that might help us find it? Lily thought hard, her small face scrunched in concentration. There was a lighthouse. I could see it from my window, and Mommy said we were safe there because it belonged to someone nobody knew about. A lighthouse narrowed it down somewhat. They had been somewhere on the coast, but New England had hundreds of lighthouses. Did they say whose house it was? Lily shook her head, then suddenly brightened. But Stella knows Mommy put the secret in Stella to keep it safe. The secret is in Stella, Alexander repeated, confused. Lily nodded emphatically. Mommy sewed something inside Stella. She said if anything happened, I should show Stella's secret to you. Alexander looked at the worn, stuffed bunny sitting on the table. Can you show me this secret? Lily picked up Stella protectively. Not here. Mommy said only in a safe place. Okay, Alexander agreed, his mind racing. We'll find a safe place. The waitress approached with the check. Everything tastes good. It was delicious, thank you, Alexander said, handing over his credit card. As the waitress walked away, Alexander realized his mistake. Using his credit card would create a record of their location. A record Victoria could potentially access, given her apparent resourcefulness. Actually, he called after the waitress, I'll pay cash instead. He settled the bill, with cash leaving a generous tip, and guided Lily out to the car. Night had fallen and the temperature had dropped. Alexander helped Lily with her coat, his mind working through their options. They needed somewhere safe to stay while Jenkins completed his investigation. somewhere Victoria wouldn't think to look, and somewhere Lily would feel secure enough to reveal Stella's secret. As they got into the car, Lily clutched Stella to her chest and looked up at Alexander with complete trust. "Where are we going now?" Alexander made a snap decision. "We're going to find that blue house, Lily, the secret one by the water. Can you help me remember how to get there?" The lighthouse stood as a silent sentinel against the night sky, its rhythmic beam sweeping across the darkened waters of Cape Ann. Alexander watched it through the windshield of his parked Tesla, the navigation system long since turned off. They had been driving for nearly 3 hours, following Lily's fragmented memories and instincts rather than any precise directions. "Is this familiar?" he asked, glancing at Lily in the rearview mirror. The child leaned forward in her booster seat, her eyes fixed on the lighthouse. "Yes," she whispered, clutching Stella tighter. "That's the one I could see from my window." Alexander surveyed the scattered houses along the shoreline, searching for blue shutters in the dim coastal moonlight. It was past 10 now, well past Lily's bedtime, but the child showed no signs of fatigue. If anything, she seemed more alert than ever, her small body tense with anticipation. There, Lily suddenly pointed toward a small cottage set back from the road. The blue house. Alexander peered through the darkness. The cottage was modest, nestled among pines with a clear view of the ocean. Even in the moonlight, he could make out the weathered blue shutters flanking each window. An unassuming retreat, not the kind of place anyone would associate with Thomas Coleman, corporate attorney with a Cambridge townhouse. "Are you sure?" Alexander asked. Lily nodded with absolute certainty. "That's where Mommy and Daddy took me. The secret house." Alexander pulled onto the narrow gravel drive, cutting the headlights as they approached. The cottage appeared vacant, no lights visible from within. He parked behind a stand of trees that concealed the car from the main road. "Stay here for a moment," he instructed Lily, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'll check if it's safe." "The key is under the white rock by the back door," Lily said matter-of-factly, "the one shaped like a heart." Alexander felt a surge of hope. If Lily remembered such a specific detail, this truly might be the right place. He approached the cottage, cautiously skirting its perimeter, checking windows for any signs of occupation or disturbance. The property appeared untouched, as if waiting for its owners to return. At the back door, Alexander found exactly what Lily had described, a white, heart-shaped rock, nestled among others in a small garden. Beneath it lay a single key. The lock turned smoothly. Alexander held his breath as he pushed the door open, half expecting an alarm, but silence greeted him. He fumbled for a light switch, and a soft lamp illuminated a cozy kitchen, clean but clearly unused for weeks. A thin layer of dust covered the countertops. Alexander returned to the car, his heart pounding with a strange mixture of relief and dread. "It looks empty," he told Lily, helping her unbuckle, "but stay close to me." Lily climbed from the car, Stella clutched firmly in one arm, while her other hand gripped Alexander's. "It feels sad," she observed as they approached the house. "It misses Mommy and Daddy." The simple statement lodged in Alexander's throat like a physical thing. "I miss them too," he managed to say. Inside the cottage revealed itself as a simple 3-bedroom retreat filled with modest, comfortable furnishings. Nothing fancy or ostentatious, just a quiet hideaway that showed evidence of hasty occupation. A child's drawing lay on the coffee table. A coffee mug remained in the sink. Books were stacked on an end table beside a reading chair. "This was my room," Lily said, tugging Alexander toward the smallest bedroom. Inside, a twin bed with a yellow comforter stood beneath a window that indeed offered a clear view of the lighthouse in the distance. A few stuffed animals were arranged on the bed, as if waiting for Lily to return. She climbed onto the bed and placed Stella among her old companions. "We're home, Stella," she whispered to the worn bunny. Alexander felt his chest tighten. This wasn't home, not really. It was a hiding place, a temporary refuge that Thomas and Sarah had secured before their deaths, before what he now suspected was their murder. "Lily," he said gently, sitting beside her on the bed, "you said your mom put a secret inside Stella. Can you show me now?" The little girl hesitated, her fingers nervously stroking Stella's tattered ear. "It's for emergencies," she said. "Mommy said only if something bad happened. I think this qualifies as an emergency," Alexander said softly. Don't you? Lily nodded solemnly. She turned Stella over and lifted the bunny's dress to reveal a small, nearly invisible seam along the back. With careful fingers, she pulled at the stitching until it gave way, revealing a slim USB drive nestled among the stuffing. Mommy put it inside during bedtime stories, Lily explained. She said it was our insurance policy. Alexander stared at the small device, scarcely larger than a postage stamp. Insurance policy, a term Sarah, a former insurance adjuster, would naturally use. But insurance against what or whom, may I? He asked, holding out his hand. Lily relinquished the drive with obvious reluctance. Daddy said it would keep us safe, but it didn't work. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Sometimes bad things happen even when we try to prevent them, he said, struggling to find an appropriate response. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. He slipped the drive into his pocket, making a mental note to find a computer as soon as possible. Let's check the rest of the house. They moved from room to room, Alexander searching for any additional clues, while Lily reacquainted herself with the space, occasionally pointing out details with the remarkable memory that only small children possess. That's where Daddy spilled coffee and said a bad word. Mommy's pretty shell collection was here. This is where we played pirate ship when it rained. Each casual observation tightened the vice around Alexander's heart. This had been a happy place, despite the circumstances that had driven them here. Thomas and Sarah had tried to make their hiding feel like an adventure for Lily. In the master bedroom, Alexander found a desk with a laptop. He tried to power it on, but the battery had long since died. After locating a charger in a drawer, he connected it and waited for it to boot up. While the computer slowly came to life, he explored the rest of the room. The closet contained a small selection of clothes, practical items packed for a temporary stay. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of Thomas, Sarah, and Lily at the beach, all three smiling at the camera. Alexander picked up the frame, studying his friends' faces. Had they known they were in danger? Had they suspected Victoria, Vanessa, was a threat? If so, why hadn't they confided in him? The laptop chimed as it finally powered on. Alexander set down the photo and turned his attention to the computer. A password prompt appeared on the screen. Lily, he called softly, do you know what password your parents used for the computer? Lily, who had been arranging her rediscovered stuffed animals in a precise line, looked up. Starfish1234, she recited without hesitation. Daddy always used Starfish for his passwords because we found one on our first vacation. Alexander entered the password, marveling again at Lily's detailed memory. The screen unlocked immediately, revealing a desktop with few icons. One folder prominently labeled Alexander caught his attention. His fingers hovered over the touchpad. Whatever Thomas and Sarah had saved for him to find, it was here. But did he really want to know? Once he opened this folder, there would be no going back to his carefully constructed life, his successful business, his elegant fiancée. He glanced at Lily, who had returned to her quiet play with the stuffed animals. Her life had already been shattered. She deserved the truth, whatever it was. And he had promised Thomas he would take care of her. Alexander clicked on the folder. Inside were dozens of files, emails, financial records, photographs, and a video file titled, Watch This First. Alexander connected his earbuds to avoid disturbing Lily and clicked on the video. Thomas's face filled the screen, his expression grave but determined. Alexander felt a painful jolt of recognition. His friend looked exactly as he had the last time they'd spoken just days before his death. Alex, if you're watching this, then something has happened to Sarah and me. Thomas's voice was steady despite the dire opening. I hope to God that Lily is safe with you as we arranged. There's so much to explain and I don't know where to start. He ran a hand through his hair. A nervous gesture Alexander had seen countless times during their 15-year friendship. I guess the beginning is as good a place as any. Sarah has a half-sister named Vanessa Richards. They share the same father, James Lawson. When James died in 2008, he left most of his fortune to Sarah, who was his daughter from his first marriage. Vanessa contested the will, but lost. She's harbored a grudge against Sarah ever since. Thomas leaned closer to the camera. We hadn't heard from Vanessa in years. Then about 8 months ago, she reappeared in Boston under a new name, Victoria Pierce. She deliberately pursued a relationship with you, Alex. We didn't realize it at first. It was only when Sarah saw you together at the charity ball, in May, that she recognized her half-sister, despite the cosmetic changes. Alexander felt his stomach drop. The charity ball had been his first public appearance with Victoria. She had approached him at the bar, spilled her drink on his jacket, and somehow turned that awkward moment into dinner the following evening. It had seemed like a meet-cute straight out of a romantic comedy. Now he realized it had been carefully orchestrated. "We didn't tell you immediately," Thomas continued, his expression apologetic. "We wanted proof of her intentions first. Sarah hired a private investigator who uncovered disturbing information. Vanessa, Victoria, has been married twice before to wealthy men who both died under suspicious circumstances. She inherited significantly each time." The parallels to what Jenkins had discovered were chilling. Alexander paused the video, needing a moment to process. His phone buzzed, another call from Victoria that he sent straight to voicemail. When he resumed the video, Thomas was looking even more serious. "We believe she's targeting you for your money, Alex, but it's more than that. She wants revenge against Sarah, and what better way than to take her closest friend? We've been gathering evidence against her. Financial records showing irregularities around the times of her husband's deaths, witness testimonies, medical reports. It's all in this folder." Thomas gestured to papers off-screen. "We plan to come to you with everything next week, after Sarah compiled the final evidence. But yesterday, Vanessa approached Sarah while she was alone with Lily. She threatened them both. That's when we decided to move to the safe house temporarily." Thomas rubbed his face, exhaustion evident. "I've arranged a meeting with the district attorney on Monday to turn over all our evidence. But I'm making this video as insurance. If something happens to us before then, you'll have what you need to bring her to justice." His expression softened. "And to protect Lily. That's what matters most now. Keep her safe, Alex. Vanessa knows about your guardianship arrangement. If something happens to us, she'll try to get close to Lily, either to eliminate a witness or to use her as leverage against you." The video ended abruptly with Thomas reaching toward the camera. Alexander sat frozen, the final words echoing in his mind. The timestamp on the video showed it had been recorded just 2 days before the fatal accident. Alexander inserted the USB drive from Stella and found it contained duplicate copies of everything in the folder, Thomas and Sarah's failsafe in case their hideaway was discovered. Smart, but ultimately insufficient to save them. He methodically began examining the evidence they'd compiled. Financial records showing large cash withdrawals just before each of Victoria's previous husbands' deaths. Email correspondence between Victoria and various offshore accounts. Medical reports suggesting Harold Grayson's heart medication had been tampered with before his fatal heart attack. Witness statements contradicting the official account of Robert Pierce's boating accident. And most damning of all, a series of emails between Victoria and someone identified only as M discussing the Coleman problem and how to make it look accidental. Alexander's blood ran cold as he read the exchange, dated just 3 days before Thomas and Sarah's car accident. V. "Are we set for Friday, M? Everything arranged. Brake lines will fail on the curve by the river. Clean quick, untraceable. V. Both must go. No survivors. M. What about the kid, V? Not in the car. She'll be with the nanny. One problem at a time. One problem at a time." Victoria had planned to eliminate Thomas and Sarah first, then deal with Lily separately. And M. Michael West Alexander's mind reeled at the possibility that his business partner might be involved. His phone rang again. Jenkins this time. Alexander answered immediately. "Mr. Grant, we've made significant progress," Jenkins said without preamble. "I think you need to hear this immediately." "I'm listening." "First, the accident that killed the Colemans wasn't an accident. The brake lines in their car had been tampered with. Professional job made to look like normal wear and tear. The police report mentions this as a footnote, but didn't pursue it further." Alexander closed his eyes. "I know, I just found evidence confirming it." Jenkins paused, clearly surprised. "You did how?" "It's a long story. What else do you have?" "We've confirmed that Victoria Pierce, formerly Vanessa Richards, is indeed Sarah Coleman's half-sister. They had a contentious relationship over their father's inheritance. But here's what's really concerning. Victoria has been communicating regularly with your business partner, Michael West, for over a year, long before she supposedly met you. So it was Michael who had helped Victoria orchestrate the murders." Alexander felt physically ill. "There's more," Jenkins continued. "We found evidence of substantial wire transfers from one of your company accounts to an offshore account controlled by West. Money that can't be accounted for in any legitimate business expenses." He's been embezzling. Appears so, and Miss Pierce, or rather Ms. Richards, filed paperwork 2 weeks ago petitioning for guardianship of Lily Coleman, claiming to be her only living blood relative. The filing is currently working its way through the system. Alexander looked over at Lily, who had fallen asleep among her stuffed animals. Stella clutched protectively against her chest. She's trying to take Lily. It seems so. Mr. Grant, given what we've discovered, I strongly advise you to contact the authorities immediately. Alexander considered this. Not yet. I need more time to organize all this evidence, and I need to ensure Lily's safety first. Where are you now? Is Lily with you? Yes, she's with me. We're somewhere safe. Alexander was reluctant to disclose their location, even to Jenkins. Mr. Grant, if what we've uncovered is accurate, you're dealing with 2 people who have already committed murder and have significant resources at their disposal. They won't hesitate to come after you both. I know. That's why we're staying off the grid for now. Keep digging, Jenkins. I'll call you in the morning with next steps. After ending the call, Alexander returned to the evidence on the laptop, copying everything to the USB drive. He needed to organize it coherently before approaching the authorities. If Victoria had connections in local law enforcement, and given her apparent resources she might, he couldn't risk his concerns being dismissed. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Alex, I'm worried. Please call. Whatever Lily has told you, remember she's a traumatized child with an active imagination. We need to talk. The calculated manipulation in the message made his skin crawl. For months he had been charmed by this woman, impressed by her poise and intelligence, attracted to her beauty and sophistication. He had planned to marry her, and all along she had been plotting murder, embezzlement, and God knew what else. His phone rang again. Michael this time. Alexander let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Alex, what the hell is going on? The Sanderson deal is falling apart without your input. Victoria's frantic. She says you've disappeared with the kid. Whatever's happening, we need to talk. Call me. Michael's voice betrayed no hint of his duplicity, the practiced concern of a sociopath, Alexander realized. For 15 years, Michael had been his trusted partner, helping build Grant Luxury Hotels from a single boutique property into an international chain, all while apparently plotting with Victoria to steal from the company and murder Alexander's closest friends. The betrayal cut deep, but Alexander pushed the emotional response aside. Right now, he needed clarity and focus. Lily's safety depended on it. A small sound from the doorway caught his attention. Lily stood there, hair tousled from her brief sleep, Stella dangling from one hand. I had a bad dream, she said simply. Alexander closed the laptop. Come here, he said, opening his arms. Lily padded across the room and climbed into his lap, her small body fitting perfectly against his chest. The red-haired lady was chasing us, she whispered, but you wouldn't let her catch me. That's right, Alexander affirmed. I won't let anyone take you away from me, Lily. I promised your dad, and I'm promising you now. Lily nodded against his shirt, accepting his words with the simple faith of childhood. After a few minutes, her breathing deepened as she drifted back to sleep. Alexander sat holding her, watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the darkened waters outside. Each flash illuminated the room briefly before plunging it back into shadow. Light and dark, truth and deception, safety and danger. Their lives had become a pendulum swinging between extremes. He needed a plan. Victoria and Michael would be looking for them, and it wouldn't take long for them to expand their search beyond Boston. The cottage was a temporary haven at best, carefully so as not to wake Lily. Alexander shifted her to the bed and covered her with a blanket. He returned to the laptop and composed an email to his personal attorney, Eleanor Hayes, attaching copies of the most critical evidence and a detailed explanation of the situation. He set the email to send automatically at 7 a.m., insurance of his own in case something happened to them before morning. Next, he drafted a message to Eleanor Winters at Oak Ridge, asking her to compile all records of Lily's enrollment and his guardianship documents. Eleanor had been a steadfast ally since Thomas and Sarah's deaths. He trusted her to respond discreetly. Finally, he composed a third email to Jenkins, providing the location of the cottage and instructing him to alert authorities if he didn't hear from Alexander by noon the following day. His preparations complete, Alexander checked the cottage's doors and windows, ensuring everything was secure. The remote location provided some protection. The nearest neighbor was a quarter mile down the shore, but he didn't underestimate Victoria's determination or resources. Alexander settled into an armchair beside the bed where Lily slept, positioning himself to watch both the child and the window facing the approach to the cottage. He placed his phone on the nightstand set to silent, but within easy reach. As the night deepened, exhaustion tugged at him. He fought it knowing he needed to remain vigilant, but the events of the past 48 hours had drained him physically and emotionally. Despite his best efforts, his eyelids grew heavy. The sound of tires on gravel jolted Alexander awake. He checked his watch, 3:17 a.m. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. It was precisely the time Eleanor had called about Lily's episode setting this entire chain of events in motion. Carefully, Alexander moved to the window, staying to one side to avoid being silhouetted against the glass. A car had pulled into the drive, not the ostentatious luxury vehicle he would have expected from Victoria, but a nondescript sedan with its headlights extinguished. Two figures emerged from the car. In the moonlight, Alexander couldn't make out their faces, but their cautious movements suggested they weren't friendly visitors. One was tall and broad-shouldered, Michael's build. The other, slimmer figure moved with Victoria's characteristic grace. They had found the cottage, but how Alexander's gaze fell on his phone, and understanding dawned. GPS tracking. Victoria must have installed tracking software on his phone during one of the many times it had been in her possession. A rookie mistake on his part. He shook Lily gently awake. "We need to go," he whispered urgently. "Stay very quiet." The child blinked up at him instantly, alert in the way children sometimes are when danger threatens. She clutched Stella tightly and nodded. Alexander gathered their minimal belongings and the USB drive, then guided Lily toward the back of the cottage. The rear exit would lead them away from the approaching threat and toward the shoreline. "Remember how we played hide and seek at home?" Alexander whispered. "This is like that. We need to be very, very quiet." Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes wide, but trusting. They slipped out the back door just as the sound of someone testing the front door handle echoed through the cottage. Alexander guided Lily down the sloping yard toward the rocky beach, staying low and in the shadows of the trees that bordered the property. Behind them, the crack of the front door being forced open carried clearly in the night air, followed by Victoria's voice. "Check every room. They can't have gone far." Alexander and Lily reached the shore, where jagged rocks gave way to a narrow strip of sand. The lighthouse beam swept over them momentarily, and Alexander pulled Lily into the shadow of a large boulder. "Which way?" Lily whispered. Alexander assessed their options. To the right, the beach curved around a point, offering potential cover, but ultimately leading to a dead end. To the left, the shore stretched toward a cluster of houses in the distance, too far to reach quickly, but their best chance of finding help. "Left," he decided, pointing toward the distant lights, "but we need to stay close to the trees, not on the open beach." They began making their way along the shoreline, Alexander carrying Lily, when the terrain grew too difficult for her small legs. The night air was cold, and he wrapped his jacket around her, acutely aware of how unprepared they were for this impromptu escape. Behind them, flashlight beams began sweeping the yard of the cottage. Alexander quickened their pace, struggling to maintain his footing on the uneven ground while carrying Lily. "I see footprints," Michael's voice carried across the beach. "They went this way." Alexander's heart raced. They couldn't outrun their pursuers, not with Lily. They needed to hide, now. A cluster of weathered boulders lay ahead, tumbled together to form small caves and crevices. Alexander headed for them, searching for a space large enough to conceal them both. "In here," he whispered, lowering Lily into a narrow gap between two massive rocks. The space widened inside, creating a natural shelter, invisible from the beach. "Stay very still." Lily curled into a tight ball Stella clutched to her chest, her eyes reflecting the distant lighthouse beam as she stared up at Alexander. "Are you coming in too?" she whispered. Alexander hesitated. The space was too small for both of them, and he needed to lead their pursuers away from Lily. "I'll be right back," he promised. "Don't come out until I call for you, no matter what you hear." "Okay." Lily's lower lip trembled, but she nodded bravely. "I'll protect Stella." "That's my girl." Alexander brushed a hand over her hair, then turned away before she could see the fear in his eyes. He moved away from Lily's hiding place deliberately, leaving clear footprints in the damp sand, then doubled back through the water to mask his approach to a different cluster of rocks 50 yards away. There he crouched, waiting for Victoria and Michael to follow his false trail. The flashlight beams grew closer. Alexander could make out their silhouettes now, Victoria in what appeared to be a practical dark outfit rather than her usual elegant attire, and beside her, unmistakably, Michael West. "He can't have gone far with the brat," Victoria was saying, her voice carrying in the still night air. "The GPS shows his phone is within 100 yards of here." Alexander patted his pocket, realizing too late that he'd left his phone near the bed in the cottage. "Another amateur mistake? What's the plan when we find them?" Michael asked, his voice tense. "We separate them," Victoria replied coldly. "You handle Grant. I'll take care of the child." "We agreed no harm would come to the kid," Michael protested, surprising Alexander. "This wasn't part of the deal." "Plans change," Victoria snapped. "The girl has seen me. She knows too much. She's 4 years old. She's old enough to identify me, just like she was old enough to see me at her parents' house. Why do you think I had to eliminate Thomas and Sarah so quickly? The brat recognized me." The casual admission of murder sent rage coursing through Alexander's veins, but he forced himself to remain still. Lily's safety depended on his ability to think clearly. "Look over there," Michael pointed toward Alexander's deliberate tracks. "Footprints." They moved toward the false trail, their flashlights illuminating the disturbed sand. Alexander used their distraction to circle behind them, working his way back toward Lily's hiding place. He needed to get her away from the beach, entirely up to the road, where they might flag down a passing car. He had nearly reached the cluster of boulders where he'd hidden Lily when he heard her scream. Alexander sprinted the remaining distance to find Victoria already there, reaching into the crevice, her face contorted with triumph as she dragged a struggling Lily out by one arm. "Let her go!" Alexander roared, charging forward. Victoria spun around, yanking Lily in front of her as a shield. In her free hand gleamed a small pistol, now pointed directly at Alexander. "Stop right there," she commanded. "One more step, and this ends badly for everyone." Alexander froze, his eyes locked with Lily's terrified ones. Stella had fallen to the sand, forgotten in the struggle. "How did you find her?" he demanded, playing for time, searching desperately for an opening. Victoria's smile was cold. "Children are so predictable. When threatened, they hide. I simply checked the most obvious hiding spots." She tightened her grip on Lily, making the child whimper. "Now let's discuss our situation like reasonable adults." Michael appeared behind Alexander, breathing hard from running. "Jesus, Vanessa," he said, using Victoria's real name. "Put the gun down. This has gone too far." Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "Shut up, Michael. You're in this as deep as I am. Or have you forgotten the money you've siphoned from the company, the evidence connecting you to the Coleman's accident? I never agreed to hurting a child," Michael insisted, moving to stand beside Alexander rather than against him. "This ends now." Victoria laughed, the sound brittle in the night air. "How noble! But it's far too late for redemption, Michael. For either of you." She shifted her aim from Alexander to Michael, her intent clear. Alexander seized the momentary distraction to lunge forward, his focus entirely on breaking her hold on Lily. The gun discharged with a deafening crack that echoed across the water. Michael fell backward with a grunt of pain, clutching his shoulder. Alexander collided with Victoria, knocking her off balance and breaking her grip on Lily. "Run!" Alexander shouted to Lily, grappling with Victoria for control of the weapon. Victoria fought with surprising strength, her manicured nails raking across Alexander's face as she struggled to bring the gun to bear. They fell together onto the sand, rolling dangerously close to the water's edge. The gun discharged again, the bullet burying itself harmlessly in the sand. Alexander managed to grip Victoria's wrist, slamming her hand against a rock until her fingers opened, reflexively releasing the weapon. Victoria's face contorted with fury. "You have no idea what you're up against," she hissed. "I've spent a year planning this, the perfect revenge. Sarah took everything from me, and now I'll take everything from her, starting with her precious daughter and her best friend." "Sarah never took anything from you." Alexander grunted, still struggling to subdue her. "Your father made his choice." "My father was manipulated by that sanctimonious bitch. I was his real daughter, not that milquetoast product of his boring first marriage. I deserved his fortune, his legacy." The raw hatred in her voice was chilling. Alexander finally pinned her arms, his greater strength prevailing. "It's over, Victoria. We have everything. The evidence from Thomas and Sarah, your emails planning their murder, your previous husbands. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison." A strange calm settled over Victoria's features. "You think you've won check on your precious Lily." Alexander's blood ran cold. He glanced around frantically, realizing he'd lost sight of the child during the struggle. "Lily!" he called, his voice breaking with fear. "Lily, where are you?" A small voice answered from the rocks above. "Here, I'm here." Alexander looked up to see Lily standing on a large boulder overlooking the beach. Stella once again clutched in her arms. She had retrieved the stuffed bunny during the fight. "Stay there." Alexander commanded, relief washing through him. "Don't move." Victoria used his moment of distraction to break free, scrambling away from him toward the discarded gun that lay just beyond Michael's outstretched hand. The older man was conscious, but pale blood seeping through his fingers, where he clutched his wounded shoulder. "Alexander," Michael gasped, kicking the gun away from Victoria's reaching fingers. "Go! Take Lily and go!" Victoria screamed in frustration, lunging toward Michael with murderous intent. Alexander hesitated only a moment before racing to the boulder where Lily waited, scooping her into his arms. "Hold tight," he instructed, running up the beach toward the road, away from the sounds of struggle behind them. Lily clung to him, her face buried against his shoulder. "She found me," she whispered, "just like in my dream." "But she didn't catch you," Alexander reminded her, his voice fierce with protectiveness. "I kept my promise." They reached the road just as a police cruiser rounded the bend, its headlights illuminating them in the pre-dawn darkness. Alexander waved frantically, stepping directly into the beam. The cruiser slowed, then stopped. A spotlight swung toward them as the officer assessed the strange sight. A disheveled man in torn, sandy clothes clutching a small child to his chest. "Help us," Alexander called. "Please, someone's trying to kill us." The driver's door opened and a uniformed officer emerged, hand resting cautiously on his holster. "Sir, put the child down and step back." "You don't understand," Alexander began, then stopped as the officer's partner emerged from the passenger side radio, already in hand. "There's been a shooting at the Sycamore Lane cottage," Alexander explained rapidly. "A man is injured. The woman is armed and dangerous." The first officer frowned clearly, weighing the credibility of this wild-sounding claim, but his partner was already requesting backup, taking the situation seriously. "Your name, sir?" the first officer asked. "Alexander Grant. This is Lily Coleman. I'm her guardian. The injured man is Michael West, and the armed woman is Victoria Pierce, also known as Vanessa Richards. She's responsible for the deaths of Thomas and Sarah Coleman 6 weeks ago." The officer's eyebrows rose. "That's a significant allegation, Mr. Grant." "I have evidence," Alexander insisted. "On a USB drive. She just admitted to the murders. She tried to shoot us." A distant siren wailed, approaching rapidly, the backup the second officer had requested. "We'll sort this out, sir," the first officer said, his tone slightly less suspicious. "For now, why don't you and the little girl wait in the cruiser, where it's warm?" Alexander nodded gratefully, carrying Lily to the patrol car. As they settled into the back seat, Lily finally relaxed her death grip on his shirt. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice small in the pre-dawn darkness. Alexander looked down at her earnest face, thinking of all they had discovered, and all that still lay ahead. Statements to police evidence to present a complicated legal battle for Lily's permanent guardianship, the unraveling of Victoria and Michael's financial crimes against his company. But the immediate danger had passed. Victoria would be arrested. The truth about Thomas and Sarah's deaths would come to light. And most importantly, Lily was safe in his arms, where she belonged. "Yes?" he told her, smoothing a hand over her tangled hair. "It's over." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with his assessment. She yawned enormously, the adrenaline of their escape finally giving way to exhaustion. "Can we go home now? Our real home, not the secret one." Alexander smiled, feeling a similar fatigue wash over him. "Soon. We have to talk to the police first, and that might take a while." "That's okay," Lily murmured, her eyelids drooping. "As long as we're together. Always," Alexander promised, watching as more police cars arrived, their lights painting the dawning sky in flashes of blue and red. "We'll always be together now." Lily drifted to sleep against him, Stella wedged securely between them. Alexander kept his arms around them both, a living shield against whatever might come next. In the distance, the lighthouse beam continued its endless vigil, sweeping across the water in rhythmic pulses. Light and dark, truth and deception, danger and safety. The pendulum had finally swung toward safety, toward truth, toward light. Alexander closed his eyes, briefly offering a silent thanks to Thomas and Sarah for their foresight, their courage, their love for Lily that had transcended even death. They had provided the means for their daughter's protection, trusting Alexander to follow through when the moment came. He had kept his promise. The forgotten promise, made casually over dinner, had become the guiding principle of his life. And now, as the sun began to rise over the Atlantic, casting golden light across the water, Alexander knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, a small smile touching her lips as she dreamed. No longer haunted by the woman with the cold eyes, but perhaps dreaming of pancakes with blueberry eyes and strawberry smiles, of blanket forts and bedtime stories, of a future where she was safe and loved. Alexander held her close, watching the sunrise through the cruiser window. A new day, a new beginning for both of them. The forgotten promise had been remembered, after all. And in remembering, Alexander had found not just the truth about Thomas and Sarah's deaths, but something he hadn't known he was searching for, a family of his own. Here's the extended ending for The Forgotten Promise. 6 months later, Alexander stood in the doorway of Lily's bedroom, watching her arrange her growing collection of stuffed animals around Stella on her new canopy bed. The penthouse had undergone a dramatic transformation since the events at Cape Ann. Gone were the sleek leather couches and minimalist artwork, replaced with comfortable furnishings and framed paintings, many created by Lily herself, that brought warmth and color to the once sterile space. "Time for school, little one," Alexander called softly. Lily looked up, her face brighter and more animated than it had been in those first dark weeks after losing her parents. "Can I bring my new book for sharing time?" "Of course," Alexander smiled, remembering how he'd once known nothing about elementary school rituals like sharing time. Now he was an expert on school lunches, field trip permissions, and the precise way Lily liked her hair braided on picture days. The criminal case against Victoria had moved with surprising speed, driven by the overwhelming evidence Thomas and Sarah had compiled. Victoria Pierce, or Vanessa Richards, as she was now officially known in court documents, faced multiple charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder for Thomas and Sarah, attempted murder for Alexander and Lily, and conspiracy charges for her previous husband's deaths that had been reopened based on the new evidence. Michael had survived his gunshot wound and, facing his own lengthy prison sentence, had agreed to testify against Victoria. His cooperation had revealed the full extent of their scheme, how Victoria had meticulously planned her chance meeting with Alexander at the charity ball, how she had manipulated Michael by playing on his resentment over profit sharing, and how they had tampered with the Coleman's brake lines on that rainy night in September. In exchange for his testimony, Michael received a reduced sentence of 15 years. The company he and Alexander had built together was now under new management, with Alexander stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on what mattered most, Lily. The custody battle had been Alexander's greatest fear, but Victoria's arrest had eliminated that particular threat. Still, he had faced scrutiny from family courts and child welfare services, all questioning whether a bachelor CEO with no parenting experience was the right guardian for a traumatized 4-year-old. Eleanor Winters from Oak Ridge had been his champion, providing testimony about his dedication to Lily since the very beginning. Eleanor Hayes, his longtime personal attorney, had marshaled an impressive legal defense of his guardianship rights. Even Jenkins had appeared in court describing Alexander's desperate efforts to protect Lily when he discovered the threat against her. 3 months after Cape Ann, the judge had made it official. Alexander Grant was Lily's legal and permanent guardian. "Will we have pancake faces this weekend?" Lily asked, slipping her small hand into his as they walked toward the elevator. "Absolutely, with extra blueberries for the eyes." Their morning routine had settled into comfortable familiarity breakfast, together the drive to Oak Ridge, where Alexander now served on the school board, and then his workday spent at a small office he'd established near the school, rather than the downtown headquarters that held too many painful memories of betrayal. They no longer lived in fear. Victoria remained in custody, awaiting trial, denied bail due to her extensive resources and flight risk. The nightmares that had plagued Lily's sleep had gradually subsided, though occasionally she still crawled into Alexander's bed during thunderstorms. The penthouse doorman greeted them with a warm smile as they crossed the lobby. "Good morning, Miss Lily. Mr. Grant?" "Morning, Frank," Lily chirped, swinging her and Alexander's joined hands. "I learned to tie my shoes yesterday. Did you now? That's quite an accomplishment." Alexander watched the exchange with quiet joy. This building, once merely his residence, had become their home. The staff, who had previously known him only as the reserved workaholic tenant in the penthouse, now greeted them as family. As they stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, Alexander reflected on the promise he had made to Thomas. A promise that had once felt like an impossible burden, but now was the cornerstone of his life. He had promised to care for Lily, to keep her safe, to be the parent she needed. Some promises, he now understood, weren't burdens at all, but gifts disguised as responsibility. The forgotten promise had given him what his wealth and success never could: a family, a purpose beyond profit margins, a home filled with blanket forts and bedtime stories and pancakes with smiling faces. "Ready for a great day?" he asked as he helped Lily into her booster seat. She nodded, her blue eyes, so like Sarah's, bright with anticipation. "Ready, and then we come home." "Yes," Alexander agreed, his heart full. "Then we come home." For that was what they had built together from the wreckage of tragedy, not just a place to live, but a home. And not just a legal guardianship, but a family. The forgotten promise, remembered and honored, had saved them both.